Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome back to our weekly webinars. I'm here with Dr. Mary Ellen Tedeschi and Dr. Shreya Soni, and we are going to be talking to you guys about one of our favorite tests to test your hormones called the Dutch test. So I believe Dr. Shreya is going to take us off first and start with discussing the endocrine system.
Yeah, so the endocrine system is made up of glands that produce and secrete hormones, which regulate the activity of cells and organs throughout the rest of your body. So this system is responsible for your growth, metabolism, sexual development, and function. So energy, mood, ability to sleep, lose weight, they're all impacted by the endocrine system. If you could go back to the last slide.
Oh.
Yeah, so you can see in this picture, you've got the ovaries, you've got this gland in the brain called the hypothalamus, the adrenal sitting on top of the kidneys. All of these work together like an orchestra. So when these instruments are in tune, the notes are melodious. When certain instruments like the ovaries or adrenal glands need tuning, the music can be, and the body can be out of tune. So it can look like brain fog, fatigue, hair loss, and that's where we come in with certain supplements, lifestyle changes, and even medications to help get these instruments back in tune. Ready for the next slide. All right, so this is the summary page of your Dutch, and here you can see it's a picture that shows where your results are compared to other women who are both menstruating and those who are menopausal. So you'll see there's a post-menopausal range there. And so the arrow indicates where you fall. So this person is a 63-year-old female, and you can see that her estrogen is very high, it's in red, and then her progesterone is quite low. So she's not postmenopausal yet, but it is tanked and it's getting close to that. So she's gonna really suffer from the symptoms of estrogen dominance. She might feel a lot of mood swings. She might have swelling. And then her testosterone is also low. So she's gonna be very tired and she'll have a low sex drive, according to this data. And the second piece here is the adrenal hormones, and that's what I'm gonna focus on. So adrenal hormones, they basically tell us about your ability to respond to stress in your environment. So you can measure how you handle stress. When you're stressed, your body secretes a hormone called cortisol, and stress is a normal part of your daily life. So we want to see that there's a normal amount of cortisol being produced. So cortisol is supposed to be present when you wake. It's supposed to rise in the morning. It's supposed to drop as you get towards the afternoon and evening, and eventually at night it's supposed to be lowest so that you can sleep properly. And so that's why you see that graph there at the bottom of the page. So this woman is at the bottom of the picture there, and so she's producing cortisol in the right fluctuation throughout the day, but it's just a small amount. So this might be because of a period of stress before, and she is burnt out, and that's why we're seeing this low production overall. Yeah, and so the Dutch test, when do you need it? I've used it in a lot of concerns in both men and women. Because of the information on hormones, I do like to see it for certain types of acne. It's a wonderful piece of information for fertility, or even if you have a family member with breast cancer, any kinds of hormone-related cancers, this provides useful information. Then of course, if you're feeling tired, if you're having hair loss, PMS, it's really useful to get this, especially early on in your life, at least once. I've had this test done on myself twice. It tells you how you're responding to your environment. And then there's also some cases where this test is not the best for you, and that's if you're currently using certain types of hormones. So for example, if you have a Mirena IUD in, or if you're taking the birth control pill, this is not the best test for you because you're taking these external hormones, and so there isn't really a need to measure your own. Your hormones will likely be low if you're on the Mirena IUD, but other parts of the test, like the adrenal piece, the energy piece, and the way you metabolize hormones, that will still be valid. But there are other companies that do these tests that are just specific to the adrenal glands, for example. So we may not go with the Dutch if you're on other types of hormones. And then you do have to prepare a little because this test takes urine samples across the course of a day. And so you do have to be in a situation where you're able to collect that. So if you're traveling, you might be more stressed. So you might get a different result than on a regular day. So that's why I don't recommend it if you're currently traveling. currently everyone's at home, so it's actually the perfect time to do the Dutch test, and it can get shipped right to your house, so you don't even need to go to a healthcare facility. And the last case where it may not be the best for you is if you have any issues with your kidneys, because it is looking at urine, and so that could throw off the data. Anything else you guys want to add?
No, that was
covered it.
Great covering it. Yeah. It also speaks to the fact that, you know, when you're taking birth control, it's not balancing your hormones. It's kind of hijacking your reproductive system. And so that's why we see it low and not optimal, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so birth control, your brain is no longer getting to talk to your ovaries about ovulating. And so that is stopped at a time. So it's a great tool. It's an intervention. And typically there's a period of time and you're talking to your doctor about it if you're using it. All right, so the adrenals. These are my favorites. They are powerhouses that secrete those hormones that are associated with your metabolism, stress, and sexual organ function. So someone who's got adrenal fatigue would be burnt out. So, you know, you're driving a car and suddenly you get this wave of fatigue and you're no longer able to focus. You may be someone who's been experiencing chronic stress, and we may need to intervene with certain nutrients that fuel the adrenal glands, like B vitamins, vitamin C, and as well as some lifestyle and diet pieces. So eating a well-balanced meal with protein can really help reduce the stress on the adrenal glands. And so in this picture, you can see that this woman has a little bit of the weight, or she's in very good shape. But if you were going to interpret in detail, she's got a little bit of the abdominal weight. That's what happens when you've got too much cortisol. That's where the weight accumulates. Yeah.
Okay, so this is going to be the page on the test, which gives a breakdown of your sex hormones and their metabolites.
I see, which is fine. Still see the love your adrenal side, which I'm happy to chat about before we head into sex hormones.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, just like Molly was talking about with the brain and the adrenal glands, this is a picture that shows that when you are exposed to stress, it impacts your brain, the hypothalamus in your brain. That sends a message to the pituitary gland, which will send a message to the adrenals. And so the adrenals do secrete sex hormones as well as these other hormones. They also produce a little bit of estrogen, progesterone, and they produce DHEA, cortisol. DHEA is your anti-aging hormone. It's a little bit like a testosterone. It gives you energy. If it is too high, you can get some of those high testosterone symptoms, which are acne. And then in fertility, DHEA is something we typically do like to look at and support because it's associated with egg quality. So this woman is producing a good amount of DHEA, and she's metabolizing her cortisol well. And cortisol metabolism also tells us about your thyroid function and liver function. So yeah, the main takeaway here is that we're looking at her cortisone, which is the cortisol stores, as well as the conversion into cortisol. And currently her stores cortisone are tapped out. So she is burnt out, and we would need to intervene with some pretty good supplements to help her with the cortisone stores.
Yeah, and that's something special about the Dutch test as well, as seeing the metabolites of the cortisol, because free cortisol is only 1% of all the cortisol in our body. And so looking at the metabolites gives us a much better idea of how your adrenals are working, how your body is responding to stress in general. Anything else on that page, Shay?
Nope, that is perfect.
Okay, awesome. Now we're gonna look at the sex hormones and the metabolites. So on this page, this is the whole breakdown of our sex hormones. So you can see it gets broken down into the androgens, your progesterone, and then your estrogen. And we're gonna briefly break those down now. So we're gonna start with the androgens. Do you see the androgens on your guys's? Okay. Yep. So starting with the androgens, we can look at the level of the androgens as well as their metabolism. So there's two things I point out on this section. The first thing I point out has to do with the DHEA, which Dr. Shreya was talking about, and the DHEAS. So these are primarily made in the adrenals. DHEA is the active form of the androgen, and DHEAS is the inactive form. And if we see that DHEAS is low, we want to start exploring things like inflammation, your adrenal health, possible chronic infections, because all of those things can inhibit that conversion from the active to inactive form. If we see DHEA as being high, this is a sign we're likely going to have symptoms of what is thought of as high testosterone. So we want to help balance that by, things like diet, lifestyle, focusing on that blood sugar regulation, all those foundational things. And then the other point I draw attention to in this section is the metabolism of the androgens down either the alpha or beta pathway. If we see on this test that our patients are favoring, say, the alpha pathway, like in this example, the patient is more likely to be exhibiting symptoms of high testosterone, which would look like maybe early male pattern baldness, agitation, aggression, high libido, cystic acne. So working on balancing that metabolism is really important for both men and females. And then next, we're going to...
I'll just add real quick. So you can shift that arrow, so you can shift it over if you are suffering from cystic acne. Herbs like salt palmetto, they target that 5-alpha reductase enzyme and help you with those symptoms.
Yes, awesome. Yeah, lots of tools in the toolbox. Okay, so now we're going to look at the pregnenolone, or the progesterone. So first, all we want you to see, the main reason we're looking at progesterone on this test is that that's going to be our main indicator to show us that we ovulated this cycle. So something of note about the Dutch test versus other hormone testing is the level of progesterone given is an average of all your progesterone measures throughout the day. When you just check serum progesterone, these values can vary greatly because our progesterone is released in a pulsatile manner. And thus, if you go for a blood test at 7 a.m. versus 11 a.m., you could get two completely different readings. So that's not really giving us an accurate look at your progesterone always. Progesterone levels is also critical when looked at the ratio of estrogen to progesterone. So, when we're looking at this progesterone level, we're looking at it in relation to our estrogen level. We kind of need our progesterone in order to keep our estrogen in check. And the value of progesterone on the Dutch test is calculated by the average of the alpha and beta metabolites from the urine. So that's that breakdown below there. And optimizing your progesterone level may help you address symptoms of bloating, fatigue, and even anxiety. So it's a really key hormone to address when we're dealing with any kind of hormonal symptoms. Do you guys have anything to add about progesterone?
Yeah, it's my favorite anti-anxiety hormone. So if I'm ever trying to boost it, I typically have women take it in the evening or night to help you relax. It's something that goes up in the second half of your cycle. I think you mentioned that in the luteal phase. So it helps bring about your period. And yeah, so there are both food as well as different types of edible oils that can help you with progesterone. So evening primrose oil can be a really gentle addition if we need to boost your progesterone. Someone like this is quite tanked, so you might use something stronger with this woman based on her symptoms.
I was going to say too, like we always think about estrogen, and we've talked about this in our past videos too, but we think about estrogen a lot and the impact that estrogen metabolism, which Molly is going to get to next, can have on our reproductive health. But progesterone is something so valuable to support and look at because it really does help to keep that estrogen in check and in balance.
Yeah, and it's almost like across the board, we're seeing this situation where women are low in progesterone and estrogen dominant. And there's many hypotheses about why we're seeing this. One is it's because of these endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment, the plastics. And another is sometimes when you're burnt out, your body is, using all of your hormones, you're putting them towards cortisol and not enough towards progesterone. And so that could be another cause why a woman's tank, and we want to shift her into producing more progesterone. Because say if you're in that stressed state where you think you're fighting a tiger all times of the day, you're not going to be primed for reproduction. Progesterone is the progestation hormone. It's associated with fertility and maintaining pregnancies. So you do need to calm yourself down to bring yourself into that progestation state.
Awesome. Yeah. A good thing to think about too is since it is our dominant hormone in the second half of our cycle, paying attention to your symptoms and noticing if anything's happening with your body those 2 weeks prior to your period can be a good clue that we're having some progesterone issues. So we're going to move on to estrogen detox. This is my favorite part of the Dutch test to look at. So this is all happening in the liver. The common metaphor that is often given for estrogen clearance is that of a bathtub. So phase 1 of the detox is water coming into the bath. So we're looking at, what kind of water you're getting. Is it good, bad, dirty? And phase 2 is the drain of the bathtub. So if we have water coming in, that's a problem. If we have bad water coming in, that's a problem. And if our drain isn't working, our bathtub is going to sit there and get dirty and the water will turn bad. And that's also not ideal. So if this is happening, we try to get rid of our estrogen. So let's look at phase 1. There's phase 1. So we have the 16-OH pathway, which is our proliferative pathway. Estrogen going down this pathway is going to it's proliferative. So this is going to tell your body to grow. So if you already have cancer, that's a problem. It's going to tell the cancer to grow. If you have a lot of fibroids or a lot of breast tenderness before your cycle, it could be a clue that you're pushing a lot of your estrogen down this pathway. And then the second pathway is this red one here. This is our bad pathway. It's bad because if it goes down this pathway, it's going to go into the quinone pathway and eventually cause DNA damage, which can put us at higher risk for estrogenic cancers. And then our third pathway is the one that we want to be pushing estrogen down primarily. And this is going to push it to here, where it's going to allow our body to push the estrogen through phase 2. So now we're going to look at phase 2. So phase 2, we're looking at also still happening in the liver, and this is going to be looking at our methylation ability. So if we're able to methylate properly through, well-working genes like the COMT gene, we're going to be able to push that estrogen coming through phase 2 and then allow it to go through phase 3 and get it out of our body. However, if you are having issues with your phase 2, it might be because of your methylation activity, and this person has low methylation activity. So we can assume that she is blocking this, which is going to make all of this back up, and she's going to actually start pushing her estrogen down the bad pathway. Do you guys have anything else to add there?
Yeah, that's really good information. And that's why I like getting this test on women earlier in life, especially because if you have that family history of breast cancer, if we can help you make that shift to be producing the good estrogen earlier. So that green estrogen in the picture, we want the pie chart to be as much green estrogen as possible. That can have a big impact on what comes down the road for you.
Yeah, and I always also say, like, you've heard us say it before, is test, don't guess. And that's really important when we're looking at your hormones, because there's a lot of things that claim to treat, hormone dysfunction, and they all work. But if you start treating, phase 1 when you really have a phase 2 problem, it's going to actually worsen your symptoms, because all you're going to be doing is pushing this pathway without speeding up this pathway, and either way you're going to start pushing more to quinone. So it's really important treatment wise to know which pathway you have an issue with.
Yeah, exactly. And I would like to add too, these tests, they're so comprehensive, and with that, they truly are an investment in your health. And if, for some patients, this isn't something that's feasible to, afford and invest in right off the bat if we're starting treatment. So, there's other testing methods that we can do through blood, for instance, the most standard across health professions. But we just don't get this level of detail when we test hormones through the blood, and we do end up doing a lot of guessing or trying to connect the dots with what your symptoms are. So especially if you've had blood tests done and you're working with someone and trying to achieve that balance, but your symptoms just aren't going anywhere, these types of tests, these comprehensive hormonal assessments, are really, really valuable to give you that inside scoop as to what's happening downstream.
Awesome.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to talk about another addition to the Dutch test, which is the organic acids portion. So the organic acids are markers of certain vitamins, minerals, your detoxification. We look at some neurotransmitters, which are produced in your brain as well. And we can take a look at your oxidative stress. So the essentially impact that stress may have had on your DNA and your overall body. So this is an add-on to, so it's included in the Dutch Complete, so the most comprehensive Dutch test. And we're able to look at your status of vitamin B12, vitamin B6 in your urine, so we can see if you need to be supported with those vitamins. Glutathione, we get to look at, and I love glutathione. I'm sure you ladies love it too. It is our master antioxidant. It is so important for not only getting rid of oxidative damage and oxidative stress, but it helps rev up that liver detoxification. So it's great for helping to make sure we're getting rid of our toxins and metabolizing through those hormones safely and effectively.
Especially metals. Glutathione's great for helping you with mercury and removing those.
Yeah, exactly. So it really helps to get all of those toxins and those heavy metals, as Dr. Shreya said, out of our body. Another cool thing about glutathione is it can work on the level of the brain. So mopping up any areas of inflammation or even in our arteries and heart and things too. So it's just such an important one to have. And if that's not at an adequate level, you can imagine all of the side effects that can come along with that.
I will say, anyone listening to this, don't go out and buy a bunch of glutathione. A lot of the glutathione that's available just as a supplement orally, you don't actually end up absorbing or getting the active molecule. We use like very specific types, typically liposomal, to get glutathione that works. And you can also check it in the blood.
Yeah, or intravenously. So we do a lot of intravenous glutathione treatments too. So that's something definitely to talk to your naturopathic doctor about. And then our neurotransmitters, so dopamine and epinephrine. So this can give us a quick snapshot into your brain and the how excited your brain molecules are getting. You know, if depression or anxiety is something that is something that you're going through or struggling with, and these can give us some insight as to what's happening at the level of the brain. And then we also look at melatonin. So melatonin when you wake up, so that first sample. And melatonin is interesting. I look at this in the context of cortisol, as we mentioned, because cortisol and melatonin, they need to work harmoniously to get you that good sleep and to make sure that you're not waking up feeling groggy. So it's one of the things that we look at. And then, as I mentioned, that oxidative stress. So taking a look at, these long-term effects of stress and how it's impacting your DNA and all of that other damage. So something really interesting that we can look at on the Dutch test.
Definitely. Yeah, I always think it's interesting looking at the neurotransmitter metabolites because there's, based on our genetics, some people are going to clear our neurotransmitters really quickly, and some people are going to have a hard time clearing it. So if you're someone who gets really anxious about something and then stays anxious for like the next 24 hours or has a hard time bringing their anxiety back down, it could show up high on this, and it could indicate that you might have a genetic composition to you that slows down that clearance of the neurotransmitters. Anything else?
I think I covered it.
All right, so how do I do the test? I briefly talked about it before. So you are collecting your urine across a day in a little cup, and then you're dipping their filter paper into the urine and you're letting it air dry, and then that gets mailed out. So the test is shipped directly to your house. You just complete it on a typical day of your life. There's no blood component, just a urine dipstick type of situation. Yeah, there are the collection instructions. So typically we will pick a specific time in your menstrual cycle. And so it depends on how long your cycle is and your symptoms. That's going to dictate when we want you to complete the test, because your hormones do go up and down across your month. Yeah. Cost. I like to be very transparent. This is a test that you can buy for yourself online, and it will cost you $450. I don't recommend you do that because you won't really know even how to interpret the results when you get them. If the provider orders them for you, then it's typically about $250 if it isn't marked up in any way. And that's for the Dutch Complete. Sometimes providers will mark it up with the interpretation piece. And then if you have a PPO insurance, I find that my patients can submit the Dutch test receipt to the PPO insurance, and then the cost comes down to just $100 for Dutch.
Yeah, and keeping in mind that that is in US dollars. So in Canada, it's a little bit different for us since it is a test that's coming from the US. So if you guys have any questions about the specifics and cost of the Dutch in Canada as a patient of mine, then feel free to reach out and we'll go through that.
And I don't use insurance at my practice because in Colorado, insurance companies aren't as good at covering this as they are in California. So, yeah.
Dutch isn't the only test. So if costs or if your other hormone, other medications were concerned, there's so many other ways for us to do this type of testing, even the urine hormones. So other companies like Meridian Valley, Diagnostic Labs, Labrix, there are just a few that do this similar type of testing. And then there's also the salivary hormones.
Yeah, I offer, so in Canada, we have Rocky Mountain Analytical here. So they have their version of a urine steroid hormone test similar to the Dutch. So that is one way that we can be more cost effective working in Canadian dollars here and still getting that valuable info.
I will say the Dutch is one of the prettier ones, and that's why we chose to feature it. Results are very well laid out in the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as always, we're here if you guys have any questions, if there's any topics you want to hear about, just DM any of us and we'll love to do a little webinar on it.
Exactly.
So,
That's me. So as you guys know, I'm practicing in Ontario, up in Canada. So I have practice locations in the Hamilton and Burlington areas, but I'm strictly telemedicine right now. My clinical focus, women's health, hormones, menopause, of course. That's why I love running the comprehensive hormone test so much in my practice. Skincare, digestive health. So there is my info for you guys to reach out if you'd like to ask me any questions.
I am physically out in California, and I am available for virtual appointments. We can do that as a health coach. So I can only order labs for you if you are actually in California. And I also love helping women with hormone balancing, especially endometriosis. Endometriosis is this chronic pain condition that's completely debilitating. And I love some of our natural medicine tools for healing it at the root. So get in touch with me if you have any questions.
And I'm Dr. Molly. I am based in Colorado, also primarily telemedicine at the time. And I have a clinical focus in women's health. I love doing a lot of education in my practice. I like empowering my women through education to kind of take control of their own hormones. And ultimately, our goal is to get you to understand your body enough that you don't necessarily need me for everything. And I also like doing a lot of digestive health and other things like that.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Yes. Bye, guys. See you next week.
See you next time. Thanks, guys.
Can I end it?
Yeah.
Still blinking.
I think it's at the top of the screen. I had a hard time.